keyboard to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
Hi, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
They may call me the Prophet, but in my life outside of the business of esports, I have worked on the investment side of the table for the better part of the last 2 decades. The single fastest growing area of gaming and esports is gambling. It's booming right now. You don't need to be a prophet like me to see that. However, as an investor, I've stayed away from gambling and betting companies because of the reputational risk and often shady nature of the companies involved. This was true until now. I've recently bought stock in a new public company called Esports Entertainment Group, or EEG, which is focused on esports and gambling. The big difference that changed my mind is that EEG is a public company, NASDAQ listed, and fully regulated, focused on esports betting. The regulatory and audit requirements of a public company are key in my mind to provide the needed transparency for players, bettors, and investors. I had an opportunity to host the CEO of EEG on this podcast a couple of months ago, and I was very impressed by his vision for the company. We've stayed in touch, and I'm delighted to announce that they've accepted to become a sponsor of the podcast. If you're a family office, institutional investor, or investor of any kind, really, Esports Entertainment Group, ticker symbol GAMBLE, GMBL, might be one of the best ways to get exposure to the esports betting space and gaming in general. Make sure to check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. Having said that, I need to make sure to state that this is only my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor or selling stock in the company. Please make sure you do your own research and seek advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest in the field. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dewalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We analyze, we dissect the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for all the love. Thank you for telling your friends about the podcast. We really appreciate it. If you haven't already, go buy William's book. Finally, he's not advertising. He's changed his background. For those of you who are listening,
I still have the book here. So that you guys, it's not too far away. You can go.
Even
buy
I
the
put
book.
the socks away. I'm not gonna.
Oh,
I'm
I
not
have the
gonna
socks
push
right
the
here
socks.
too, Paul. Do you want me to hold the socks up?
Sure. You. For
Actually,
those of you who are listening,
my reach. They're right outside of my reach. They're on the table next to me.
No, go buy some Business of Esports socks. Go buy William's book of esports. Definitely both worth your while. But most important, tell your friends about the podcast. This is how people find out about it. This is how we've grown so quick, and we really appreciate it. William, how was your week?
You know, they're all so busy right now, Paul. It's like
I feel like we didn't talk this week. It's like
we didn't.
I felt a little bit like, like when your significant other goes away, or you're traveling for work and you don't see the other person for a week. I missed you.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I missed you too. Well, that's so sweet. That's like really
In fact,
sweet.
I had someone message me on LinkedIn saying, you and William are great. It feels like that you've known each other for your whole lives. I'm like, if only people knew. It's only been like what, 3-4 years now? 4 years? Something like that?
I can't believe it's been that long because I feel like it's just, I think we should go to it, but like at some point for the podcast, we should do our meet cute. Do you guys know the phrase meet cute?
No, what is meet cute?
So like in romantic comedies, right? like
Okay.
when you're gonna meet, when like the love interests meet for the first time, it has to be in this cute way, like this interesting, kismet karma way, right? That's like the idea.
Okay.
And so if you're a rom-com writer, the slang you use for it is meet cute. It's your meet cute, right?
I
And so
have
like
never heard of this term.
you've never heard of the meet cute term?
No.
It's like such a great industry term. So yeah, we should talk about our meet cute, which is like our funny story about how we met, and like now look at us, ha ha ha, we're together.
I mean, the beauty of this is we both now have a new meet cute, because we've got a fantastic guest this week on the podcast, Brad Tenenholtz, who's the CEO of CEA. I love that. Like the words there are beautiful. CEA standing for the Corporate Esports Association. He's been working with corporate esports for more than 8 years. During that time, the business has donated more than $400,000 to charities. You work with more than 200 corporate teams around the world. Brad, welcome to the Business of Esports podcast.
Thanks, Paul. It's really exciting to be here. I'm a longtime listener.
Well, we appreciate that. It's always fun when people come on and actually have listened to the podcast, so they know, at least they know what to expect. But would love for our listeners, because I actually had not heard of the Corporate Esports Association. I love your mission. I love what you guys are doing, and I think our listeners would benefit greatly from just telling them about it and a little bit about your story in terms of how you started it, how you got involved, etc.
Well, it's really simple, Paul. We get companies from all over the world to play video games against each other. So, a bunch of coworkers will get together. So, the employees of like General Motors will get together. They'll make let's say a Valorant team. They'll pick a charity to play for. They'll play for, one match a week for 14 weeks against other companies just like them. And the winner of each game's tournament decides to which charity all the money goes. So this season we donated to a whole bunch of charities, a whole bunch of, first, second, and third place winners across like 9 different titles. Yeah, I mean, it's just a really great experience, and we love doing it.
I'm curious, how do you pitch this to like big corporate customers, like a General Motors, right? Is the phone call like, hey, do you guys want to play some games?
I had a totally different angle.
What were you going to say?
Paul, you answer your question first, and I'm going to answer my question. Yeah.
Oh, I'm very excited. No, so believe it or not, like the best thing about working with the CEA is that sales calls do not feel like sales calls. Like you hit it on the head, Paul. And if there's one thing I want to like say to the viewers of this podcast, like one word above all else, it's that I think we have this perception as people like in the esports industry that people outside of the esports industry really don't know who we are, what we're about, what we do. And that stopped being true like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yep.
I have, when we first started making like pitch decks, we would put in things like, hey, this is what esports is. This is how big it is. And everyone's like, yeah, we know, keep going.
Interesting.
And we get rid of it. So, I mean, when we do, that's a lot of how these calls go. We say, hey, do you like playing video games? Do you want to play some more video games? and across the board, people say yes. I think what's more surprising is that for 60% of our teams, registration fees are paid for by their company. So they at least know what it is well enough to understand the value of it. And I could talk more about, the mechanism by which, the CEA actually makes money, if that, hammers it home even further.
I was going to ask that, but I want William to get his question in first.
We'll get there. Sure.
Yeah, my question is actually a little different, which is there, I'm actually curious, given that this is gamers, right, picking the charities that their donations go to, are there commonalities? And well, actually, I have 2 questions. First is, are there commonalities in the charities that got picked? In other words, like, what are gamers' favorite charities? I'm kind of curious.
William, that's a great question. I mean, it certainly would be a thing to have, like Twitch chat pick a charity for you. I mean, imagine how that would go. Now, our audience is a little bit older than that on average, but like not a lot, right? I mean, Twitch is aging too. So, the CEA has gotten really good in the past like 3 years at knowing what charity is and how to properly benefit charity, and like, what organizations are good to give to, and then in what way to do that. So that when someone comes to us and says, hey, we need a charity, but we don't know which one to pick, we've gotten a lot better at answering that question in like an informed manner that kind of aligns with their values as a company. But if the question you're asking is, has anyone ever submitted like an alt-right charity think tank as a joke? Yeah, that's happened. And we, we work around that too.
Oh no, I mean, my question was literally more general, because I'm curious if like gamers like want to give to specific classes of interest.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Because we're almost like our own demographic and we're mobilized in our own way. And I'm
yeah,
just like curious if there are like specific issues or things that matter to gamers, because I'm particularly, it kind of ties to the second question I had, which is like, um, I've noticed just the rise of charity and propelling game viewership is such a
right.
common theme of the past. Like the classic example in my mind that I think of is the AGDQ, or Awesome Games Done Quick, right? Which is like, it's such a big deal whenever they do that. And I'm kind of curious too, maybe this will lead into my second question, which is like, how do you see the charity space evolving going forward in gaming, given that it seems like it actually plays a pretty significant part in mobilizing communities today?
Oh, well, you're asking great questions today. So let me answer both of those. So the first thing is gamers donate less as gamers and more as functions of the company they represent. So for instance, if you ask Amazon what charities they're going to give to, they'll tell you like very data-driven things, right? So we're going to give to GiveWell because they know exactly the right places to give to, and we think they do the math better than we do. But if you talk to like Red Hat, which is a company that is, much more on the, free software, let's do good in the world, angle, they want to give to, charities that maybe you hadn't thought of. They want to save the rainforest. They want to do things like that. So I think the overall theme, and this is a good thing, is that companies donate to charities that align with their corporate values.
Got
Brad,
it.
I'm
Yeah.
curious, who typically are you, like, two questions. One,
Mhm.
who are you typically selling into when you're pitching to these companies? Is it the HR departments making these sort of decisions? And two, what is the business model? Like, I want to make a comparison here, but please don't read into it in any way. Is CEA kind of like the Playverse, but for big,
Corporations, yeah.
big corporations? Is that sort of the business model?
Yeah, that's actually a really good way of thinking of us. So, what we do to make money is we go to the companies that play with us, and we offer these in-house team building events, which are awesome. So we bring in like famous talent, like literally people you see, casting like, live esports events. We bring them in. We have everyone, play on internal corporate teams against each other, and we call it an aspirational esports experience. We make it feel like it's very real. And then what we do is we record the practice sessions. So CEA went out, we did some software development, and we have this platform called CEA Comprehend. So we put all of the recordings of their practice sessions into CEA Comprehend, and we spit out really fine-grained data-driven metrics about why this event made you a better company. So why people are communicating better, how they know each other better. Are they using fewer curse words? Are they using more first names? Are they talking in an objective-driven manner? So that's kind of our business model, right? We take that, those events of varying shapes and sizes to the companies that play with us. So to answer your question, Paul, I know it was a long way around. We talk to a very wide breadth of people. Just on my Discord friends list, I have everyone from directors down to like, junior engineers, and all of them help us make decisions, for their companies as it pertains to. But, certainly we talk to all levels of hierarchy in a company, and I don't really think we're any more biased toward HR than any other department.
Okay.
We'd be very likely to talk to HR if an HR rep was playing in the CEA.
But like, let's say, hypothetically, I'm just trying to understand the product stack and the business model here.
Sure.
I'm an employee at Amazon, right? And I'm listening to this podcast, and I'm like, hey, that'd be cool if I could play with my colleagues, and like, it's all for a good cause, right? Would I reach out to CEA and you guys could just enable that, like, sort of outside of the organizational benefits, outside of the, all those other things? Is it a platform that, literally employees can leverage to organize, like, call it locally within their, organization, within their teams?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think if you're if you're an employee listening to this and you want to get involved, just go to gamingforgood.gg, and you can kick the ball off tonight. You can do it really easily and start the conversation with us. It always helps to bring in more stakeholders so we know what the values are, how we can align values, make sure you're getting out of it what you want to get out of it. But yeah, we can do it in one day.
Brad, I'm a little offended though. You said you hold these events for these teams, right? These call, I guess, like these kickoff events, and you invite super famous esports people. My invite must have been lost in the mail. I'm assuming it's in my spam folder, maybe. I don't know.
Well, you
Let me
never
check.
check your
We'll find
spam folder. That's obviously the issue here. If you check your spam folder, Brad's been sending it to you for years.
When the most famous human being in all of esports doesn't get an invite, I mean, I don't know. So, but anyway,
Next time, Paul, don't worry.
there you go. just in terms of like where you see, because you mentioned you saw this inflection point happen where you sort of no longer needed to
Right.
make the case for esports, right? Specifically, um, at what point, sort of in the last few years, did you see that inflection point happening? And B, do you find it's a specific sector or type of company that is much more sort of amenable to this kind of thing, understands it better, right? Are there certain industries like, I don't know, like consumer packaged goods or things like that, or luxury brands, or are there specific industry sectors, types of companies that this resonates sort of more immediately with?
So certainly, if you go to Microsoft, like you don't really have to sell esports, like they get
Right.
it. But honestly, even if you go to companies that are exactly the opposite of companies you would think would be really savvy to esports, I mean, Walmart is really into esports. They totally get esports. Um, I have yet to find a company that has like kind of crossed my radar in terms of an organization that can either join the league or that we can do business with that hasn't at least known what they're talking about. In fact,
Yep.
I think the problem a lot of them have had is that they've had esports conversations before, and what's happened is esports experts have gotten on the call with them and tried to educate them about what their goals ought to be, and that's left a very sour taste in their mouths. They know exactly what they want to get out of esports, and they just don't quite know how to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. William, I don't know if you had any other questions, but I kind of.
I'm just surprised because it's interesting. I still think there's a little bit of an education gap with esports.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, maybe it's like the sort of people that you're talking to, are like there's a certain level of savviness I think required, like just to be interested in doing a gaming tournament, right? Whereas there's maybe some pre-qualification because I do still think like in general interest, like there's definitely an awareness now, like everybody knows it's a thing. Like nobody's going to be like, I've never heard of that. Whereas like 3 years ago, even people would be like, what is this thing? Or what does it do? But I don't know. I still feel like the savviness is still building in the.
Well, you're exactly right, and let me prove it to you. Look how many companies in the past like 6 months have gotten really into like the esports tournament hosting space. People are very aware that esports are a thing and they want to get involved, but they don't quite know how to do it. So you might know that esports is a thing, but you don't know what League of Legends is. Esports is a thing, but you don't understand what a headshot is. And bridging that education gap, Will, I think we're on the same page on that. And reaching out and finding organizations. I mean, I know you guys talk a lot about some of the companies that have made acquisitions in the esports space, Microsoft, Facebook, Twitch, that have kind of gotten into esports tournament management. This esports for all headline. I really think that's the future and where things are going.
Yeah, it's interesting, Brad, because your business touches on something that I fundamentally have sort of rallied for over the last couple of years, which is the definition of esports right now is too strict, right? Like
Exactly.
just the top pros on a stage in a stadium with an audience. Like if that's the strict definition we all have to adhere to me, that's not that exciting. Well, like I think what I love about what you're doing is, can you bring esports to like amateurs, right? And in a way that is a win-win for everybody, where you're doing good and they're having fun and they're team building. Like I really like that sort of that model and that mission. To me, that's the bit more exciting future of esports. It's the broader audience. It's not the sort of just that tip of the iceberg kind of audience.
Well, and what it does is it grows the platform. And let me explain. So, you watch the NCAA tournament, right? The basketball tournament, and you watch, let's say it's Ohio State versus Indiana. You might be aware that Ohio State and Indiana have good basketball teams. You might be interested in that. But that's kind of, unless you went to one of those schools, that's your connection with that event. But, think about esports. Think about what the CEA is. If you're watching Microsoft versus Google, everyone knows who those companies are. I mean, instantly, as soon as you tune in, you have a stake in this discussion. You have a stake in what's happening on the screen in front of you. And we think, that kind of forward momentum is really powerful.
Brad, one recurring topic on the podcast is publisher power, right?
Yeah.
Is this something you guys have run into in terms of, publishers trying to dictate what you can or can't play, what kinds of tournaments you can or can't put on? Have any of them expressed excitement or discomfort or somewhere in between at the kinds of tournaments you guys put on for, corporate employees and corporate customers? I'm just curious if they've poked their head into your business in any way over the years.
Oh, certainly. So I'll tell you this: it is really easy to figure out what a publisher's like future aims for their platform are just by seeing where they put their foot in front of us and what we're trying to do. So I'll give you an example. So Riot, you can do almost anything you want to do as long as it isn't collegiate. Riot will let you do anything.
Yep.
But then we talk to Blizzard, and Blizzard has look, they're a pleasure to work with, but they do have some hoops to jump through, and you kind of see where their goals are and where their initiatives are. Psyonix obviously works through Twitch. That's a whole thing. So yeah, I mean, we get very explicit permission before we do anything. It's a big danger.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you do have to make sure you play nice with all the publishers.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to go out, get written permission for everything you do.
Interesting.
And we have definitely seen organizations who have tried to do, I don't know. So once upon a time, there was a tournament organization called lowkey.gg, and they ran afoul of Blizzard in the Overwatch League. And the Overwatch League did not like that very much. And very quickly that turned bad for lowkey.gg. So, don't make mistakes like that.
It's interesting that sort of our this sort of recurring theme just always seems to hold true, right? Like as long as you don't cross the publishers, as long as you play nice, your business is fine.
Right, as long as you stay within their goals.
But it's an interesting point that you raised about like by what the publishers don't want you to do, you can see what they're planning to do. I think that's actually an interesting insight in business. Like, people protect the most what they're, what they care about, right? So I don't know. It's kind of a cute takeaway, maybe.
Certainly. I mean, so we're a charity tournament, right? So it's interesting which organizations are interested in telling us what charities we can and cannot donate to and why. Yeah, that's been an interesting set of hoops to navigate. And it's part of why we got so good at vetting charities internally.
But the publishers have dictated the charities that are acceptable?
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So even if the employees all get excited about planting trees, if Riot doesn't want to plant trees, I'm obviously just making up an example, right?
Yeah, I'm trying not to name names either.
Yeah. If publisher XYZ doesn't want to plant trees, then they can't plant trees. Is that sort of the fundamental? Interesting.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, so they wield a lot of power.
Yeah. I mean, we have those conversations really well with teams, and typically they take it pretty well.
Yeah.
But you could easily imagine a situation where that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating business. I love what you guys are doing, Brad. Let's move into some news this week. There were a few interesting news stories that I think we should talk about. The first here is from The Guardian. It's actually two stories that I think are related here. And it's from theguardian.com. The headline here is video games have replaced music as the most important aspect of youth culture. It says the global video gaming industry took in an estimated $180 billion in 2020, more than sports and movies worldwide. The article goes and sort of digs into some of these statistics, how much gaming has increased over the years, the struggles of music, things like that, but how gaming really has now the cultural zeitgeist that music used to have, or defines the zeitgeist the way music used to. Related to this, I just want to bring up the second story, was an investment from Variety. An article from Variety.com talking about how, and we talked about this at length last week on the podcast and on the live stream, the huge investment that Roblox took in, $520 million, led by some huge funds. But I think what we all didn't know was that Warner Music made an 8-figure investment in the platform as part of that. So that's at least 10 million plus.
Crazy. Yeah.
Which out of a $520 million round is, still substantial. And so two interesting stories related Warner Music, and then you get this article talking about video games replacing music. I'm curious how you guys see the current state of the relationship between music and gaming. I have my own thoughts, but I'm really curious just broadly what you guys think about both of these articles and sort of the general relationship between the two as it stands now.
Brad, you go first. You go first. I have some strong thoughts, but you go first so that you're walking into the lion's den.
Yeah, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I think in general, both of these acquisitions kind of play into a theme that I saw really expand over 2020, which is really weird acquisition by big name brands in the esports space, because I think they're being guided more on passion than principles. So I really don't see how the Roblox investment would help Warner Media. Other than that, I think Roblox is going to continue to expand as a company.
I mean, I'm guessing again, right, that Warner Music invested in Roblox because they sort of saw what was happening in Fortnite, right, where various music companies were holding concerts to great success, right, and they figure, well, if this metaverse thing, which is now the buzzword of the day, if this metaverse thing takes off, we
Okay,
want to
so
have some inside track here, right? I
yeah,
just think, and William, I don't know if you're going here, to me the relationship between gaming and music is an interesting one. Like fundamentally, I believe gaming consumes the music industry because we see that in those Fortnite kind of activations. But then you see the music industry sort of still acting as backwards as they always have, right?
yeah.
With all the DMCA takedowns on Twitch, no one can play any music. Like you would think if they realized that gaming was the future of their industry too, they might be playing it quite differently. William, I don't know if you were going in that direction, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm actually almost mad you linked these two stories, Paul, because I think they're both so big that like they deserve their own breathing room. And I was like, I know we do our podcast prep where we're going
Yep.
over the topics, and I'm like, what? So first of all, I have to say on the Guardian one, just as a standalone piece before I react to what I think is the more interesting, which is the music side. Just on the Guardian piece alone, like my dad sent me that article. Like that article was like something that, was making the rounds as a big, like, I don't want to say it's a watershed moment for our industry, but I think a lot of people read that article and were like, oh, gaming is actually that big. Like it's the size comparison why that article is so effective, right? Bigger than film and music. Like everybody associates film and music as big industries. So I don't know, it was nice. And I do think, look, the reality is, I'm a big believer that dollars drive cultural creation. This is a totally separate thing that we can talk about. I have some, kind of like, I guess some theories about this, but I think fundamentally a lot of cultural generation tends to follow economic generation. And so I think it's like the fact that the cultural influence of the industry is rising so much says a lot about the economic impact of the industry. The two are closely linked. So it's kind of like that it's going to be such a major influence on youth if there's so many dollars behind it. So that's sort of the first piece I want to react to. The second piece, the bigger thing, is the Roblox Warner Brothers thing, because I think this is really cool.
Warner Music specifically.
The music. And now we're gonna decouple it from the first article, and we're gonna go straight into the music portion, because I believe that, I'll put this the correct way. I believe what's going on here is that I think it could be more synergistic than just, oh, we should have some esports exposure, right? Like, or we should have some gaming exposure. Let's put some money here. I think if you think of what Roblox is doing, they're doing custom digitized worlds, right? That's fundamentally what they're building. And if you think about a core experience in any custom world, it's music, right? And they're going to have difficulty injecting music into those game worlds unless they have a partner who can give them a ready access to music catalogs, right? And I could be wrong about this here, I'm not sure, but if you look at the artists that are represented by Warner Music, right, there's a strong overlap with artists that have appeared in other games over the years, particularly things like Rock Band, right? And it wouldn't surprise me if it's not lost on Warner Music the potential for, say, the Rock Band platform to have driven incremental sales of the music catalog, right? It would not surprise me if this is part of a more strategic play here to make our catalog of music available for creation, implementation, in Roblox games in return for licensing fees and royalties from the creators, the levels, the purchase packages, or whatever. Like, I don't, it's a reach. It could just be a very simple, oh, we better put some money in gaming, it's hot. But I see it as more synergistic, particularly with all of the activities that are taking place in the gaming space today, right? Like, just look at what League of Legends has done with their KDA label. They've clearly shown that games can be an avenue to drive music and music consumption. So I don't know. My personal belief is this is the tip of something bigger. Just, FYI.
Can I push a bit on that, William? Because there's a few things I want to unpack there, but who do you think approached who as part of this investment in your mind? Was this Warner Music, trying to squeeze themselves into the deal? Or was this Roblox reaching out to Warner Music going, hey, this is going to be essentially our IPO. We want you in here.
for my theory to be true, I hope it was Roblox reaching out, right? I hope it was Roblox saying, what are the elements of world creation that we don't have a good way to do in-house today? Music. Okay. Right. So it would certainly help us in this next funding round to have a music catalog company back us, because that's going to give us access and insight there. For my theory to be true, I almost think it would have to be driven that way, because I don't think music companies are in the business of calling people up and saying, do you happen to want an investment for, our catalog to be integrated into your digital world creation tools, right? Like,
Well,
there's not a lot of pull or push the other way. If you have to believe the strategic vision is coming from Roblox, right?
Well, let me push a little bit on that, Will. I think you're probably right, to be clear. But there's an element here to me that says, like, this looks really good if you're the person within Warner Music who suggested this, you're young and you want to bet your whole career on it. Like, if you really think you've got a great idea, I mean, you will never be disassociated with this for the rest of the time you work there, which is something I've seen happen before.
The question is,
Yeah.
what's the play, right? Like, if you're Warner Music and you push this internally to make this investment, what is the play? Is it to William's point that it's like integrating your music inside Roblox's universe?
Probably, but looking at where I think music has gone in esports and like really successful music in esports, I almost wonder if it's more of a music creation angle than looking at established artists already. Like creating the next big track on Spotify or something.
Because in my view, like, Warner Music could accomplish everything they want without having to make an investment, right? This could have been a commercial deal. They could have just cut a deal with Roblox and said, hey, we'll give you a license to our entire catalog. Here's what we want in return. Like, if Roblox wanted to go get music, they didn't need to necessarily take $10 million from Warner Music. Right? Like, this could have been a pure commercial deal.
Yeah.
Here's where I struggle, which is just the music industry historically has never understood the threats to their own industry. They've always recognized them too late. They've never they never see the wall coming for some reason, right? They're driving fast, but they always never seem to see the wall.
So Paul, let me turn that back around on you. So let's say they did. Let's say the music industry understood what we understand about esports. Yep. Then what would this look like? What would this deal look like in that case?
To me, you'd have a much more, in my mind, holistic strategy around taking the music that you own and the catalogs that you own and the artists that you own, right? And really trying to essentially port them to a growth space like esports and gaming without all of the sort of the old traditional thinking. Like, again, why are no big labels allowing for playing of music on Twitch? Right? Like, if you're okay,
exactly where I was going.
If you're okay having your music played in Roblox, right, as part of this deal, because you believe, to William's point, that it will sell more music because people get exposed to it, they hear new artists, whatever, right? If you believe that, well, you could make the same argument for any platform, really. Twitch, YouTube, like, you name it. And so why show interest here, but then be totally closed off in other areas? I don't really understand.
Right. It is amazing to me on the topic of music and esports that we are as many years into the Amazon acquisition of Twitch as we are, and we still have all of the music restrictions on Twitch that we do. You would think that'd be one of the first problems they could clear up.
And so this is where I gravitate, Brad, to your point, which is this feels like the whole Warner Music thing doesn't feel like a strategy to me. It feels like this esports thing is hot, right? Let's put 10 million or 15 or 20, whatever they put in, right? Let's be associated with this. I'm some internal champion, to your point, really sort of believed in this. But I fundamentally don't believe it solves the music industry's problem. And I don't think they have strategy that solves all the issues across the board on all platforms. Like, making one bet on Roblox, in my mind, is not enough.
Yeah, and what's crazy is, and I can just tell you from personal experience, if you look at the new music industry, so the streaming platforms and the music that's come up in the last 10 years, there is absolutely a gaming strategy, and they are moving toward it, no holds barred, as fast as they can go. And I think we'll probably see some headlines in the next year or two. But you're right, looking back at more traditional music, this doesn't feel like it's connected to anything to me.
I mean, guys, I guarantee they're going to hit another wall that they just didn't see for some reason. Like,
it is an interesting point, though. I mean, I know this isn't really like esports business, but it is an interesting business question. Like, why is that industry not so good at maturing?
Yeah.
Because they're like quite seriously, like you could say it's all industries. Like every industry has trouble dealing with existential threats. But like it is true, the music industry feels particularly bad about it, right?
Really
They
bad.
still,
Like
yeah,
everything.
they still feel like it still feels to me like radio is a core item on their P&L. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like it's like
Even
that's
radio has
yeah.
I would argue evolved better like with the times than the
That's
traditional
true.
music industry has.
So,
Like radio has gone into podcasting and things like that, right?
William, I think I could just answer that question for you. So, I probably don't need to tell you guys this, but esports as an industry is like, it can get rough. It can get, it's not always above the board all the time. And I think the music industry is like that as well. And I think, when those elements impact, good people who are, moving things forward, the nasty stuff tends to win. That's something we've encountered time and time again. It's why the CEA was founded. And I suspect they're kind of becoming the victims of their own wealth.
So what do you guys think? I want to hear some predictions here. How soon do we see concerts in Roblox a la Fortnite? Like totally knocking off the Fortnite concert model? Or do you think that's not going to happen at all?
Oh,
So
go
Roblox plays
first,
with
Brad,
the
you go
Yeah, thank you. So Roblox plays with the CEA, so I have to be a little careful in my prediction here. But I would say it's a tough engineering challenge. So let's give them 2 years to do it.
Okay, William.
Oh, I would go way sooner. I think if this is the sort of thing that you're going to do and there's any strategy behind it, you want to show a proof point relatively early. It might not be a concert, but I would say, integrated level music packs or something like that in the next 3 quarters. I would say we'd be seeing something before Q3. I mean, quite seriously, because it's difficult, it's fast, but at the end of the day, there's already music in these games. It's not that hard to pipe stuff in. And if this has any strategy behind it, and they're thinking of doing something bigger and more significant 2 years out, they're going to need to get some proof points in this year.
I definitely agree. It's probably this year, only because and I'm a big fan of what Roblox has been doing. I don't even question the valuation. William, you missed this, but last week on the live stream, I bet Jeff that that Roblox's daily active user numbers would outstrip Twitter's over the next 2 years. And so I'm hugely bullish on Roblox as a platform. And when you read their press release, for the $520 million fundraise, as we talked about last week, there was no mention of gaming even in that, right? It was all about, I don't even remember what they called it, human something experience. And so in that vein, I have no doubt they have ambitions to integrate music in some way. But I think we're going to see more of these metaverse kind of efforts from Roblox over the next year, because they have to live up to sort of what they've been advertising. I think what they've been essentially selling investors on. At some point, they have to live up to that. It can't be just a game platform. All right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk about, again, other huge news here. This is Microsoft that was in the news with three stories, actually. And this article has all three of them here, but I have a separate article that breaks down one of them even further. This is from onmicrosoft.com. The headline is Microsoft News Recap, Minecraft Earth shutting down, Xbox head wants cloud gaming games to support separate purchases and more. So let me just give you the three Microsoft stories we're going to talk about here.
Okay.
Nintendo execs laughed at Microsoft's attempt to acquire the company 21 years ago. We're going to get to this one in a second. We're going to talk about Minecraft Earth shutting down in June of this year. And we're going to talk about Xbox head Phil Spencer wanting to make cloud gaming, aka Project xCloud games, available for purchase without a subscription. I want to start with this one, guys. Xbox Cloud Gaming, as you know, is today only accessible if you have a Game Pass subscription, the $10 or $15 a month, sort of Netflix for games that Microsoft offers. Now Phil Spencer is saying he wants to make it so that people can buy Xbox games and stream them via cloud gaming, very similar to Stadia's approach. So you don't need the subscription. You can just buy the game and use it via xCloud. What do you guys think of this? Because this is a pretty significant shift, right? I think we had believed up until this point they were very much on the buffet kind of strategy, right? You pay $15, you get all the games you can play, plus the streaming, etc. This is definitely a shift. So I'm curious if you guys are bullish on this shift, not bullish on it.
So
Like-
let me
Oh, you go. You
Go
go,
ahead,
Brad.
Brad.
And I'll go.
Thank
You go. Yeah.
You guys are so kind. So let me let me just first make a statement about like kind of cloud available gaming in general and like kind of the esports for all approach that Paul, you and I have kind of been talking about. One of the most common questions we get when we go to any organization, a company, a charity, whatever, and say we want to do an event with them is, well, how is this going to happen? Like logistically, can we play this on our laptops? And you can imagine a world where every game is available on Stadia, and suddenly like esports is just feasible for a whole class of people that it wasn't before. So to the extent, and I don't know what that extent is, but to the extent that this move enables that, I think it's an extremely powerful move by Microsoft.
William?
Go ahead, Melissa.
So my take on this is I don't see how this makes sense at all. Like, honestly, unless there's some systemic factor I'm missing here. And I can think of one and I'll touch on it. But like, I literally don't get it. This would be like, imagine if Netflix is like, Netflix thinks you should be able to just buy, Stranger Things instead of subscribe. Like, the whole beauty of this business model is it's the subscription model. And subscriptions are way, way better than one-time purchases because even though you collect less upfront, you lock people into a habituated service and you extract way more from them over their lifetime. And I thought it was kind of brilliant that Microsoft was not willing to compromise on this front here, right? And they were going to say, no, we're all in on this Games Pass subscription model for games. That's our entire strategy. It's where we're crushing Sony. It's where we're winning. We're going to tie our cloud gaming to that too. And let's be honest, I think you would say based on the success of something like Netflix, which is all you can eat movies for, what is it, $10 a month? Like the logical thing is all you can eat games for $10 a month. Now, my only reservation here, so I don't get this unless, and here's the unless there is this systemic factor, which is the reality is, unlike Netflix, where people will binge watch 30 seasons of The Greatest Cake Factory, or I'm making up a Netflix show, I don't know, right? Like other than that,
love that show, William.
Yeah, whatever. Or like
season 19 of The Greatest Cake Factory was so good.
Season 19 of like Storage Hunters, Bargain Kings, like like whatever I could do. Jeez, these are, by the way, I'm
cheap knockoffs of real shows. That is what they are.
That's
We're
right.
really
They
afraid
are.
of copyright here.
I just knocked off Storage Wars. That's what I actually. Yeah. Well, but like the thing I think is, unless it's unlike that, where the kind of the padded back catalog really matters, right? Because people will, in gaming, it's like, what do I want to play this month? Cyberpunk. That's the only thing I want to play this month. And CDPR is saying, and again, Cyberpunk might be a bad example, but you take that as a stand-in for big marquee game of this quarter, right? And the publisher of big marquee game of this quarter is saying, nah, I don't have to buy into your subscription model. People will give me $60 directly. I'm not going to put it in your $10, $15, $20 Game Pass. I'm giving away a ton of revenue, right? And so maybe if that is the issue behind cloud gaming, that it's adoption driven by marquee titles, maybe that is why Phil Spencer thinks it needs to be carved out, because they can't get the things in the pipe that would justify a subscription for you, because the stuff you really want only gets sold single serve. But even if that is the case, my response to Microsoft is, then do what Netflix did and put the must-watch stuff in the pipe yourself, right? Like Netflix had this problem, which is, okay, well, the really good shows people don't want to put into a $10 subscription pack. So they made their own really good shows, right? And that worked. And that got their subscription, revenue model humming even faster. So it's like, Microsoft, you can do this. You have an amazing suite of games to prime this pipe yourself. Just put one of your own titles in there, or the suite of amazing Bethesda properties you just acquired. So even then, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but in general, it doesn't make any sense.
William, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. I actually think it's a great move, and I'll explain why. So if you look at, the difference between Microsoft and Netflix, the big advantage Microsoft has is that there is a historical precedent that games cost about $60. So if you're charging people less than $60 a month, you're kind of making the statement that people are going to, purchase and pay for like 1/6, whatever the math is, of a game each month. But if I look at my Steam library, there are definitely games like Skyrim and Factorio where I have an amount of hours that I am not going to announce on the stream on them. But every other game I have is, 7 hours, 15 hours, 16 hours. I probably do play about 1 or 2 games a month, and then I move on. And I think I'm a pretty normal gamer in that respect. To the extent that, people are like that, I think Microsoft probably stands to, increase revenue pretty substantially this way.
But because you think people will buy games individually, Brad, instead of signing up for the subscription?
Exactly. Yes.
Look, Phil Spencer's argument here, just to be clear, I think, and he's not here, so I'm putting words in his mouth, but his argument here is we want to get xCloud to the masses. In other words, the ability to stream games from Microsoft servers to your device, right? We want to bring this to the masses. And potentially the $15 a month subscription is too much of a gate. And so if we can offer something where you can still stream games and it costs you $0 in subscription fees, but you just buy the game you were probably going to buy anyways, and still allow you to stream it remotely, then maybe that's something. Look, I was a big fan and have been a big fan of Xbox Game Pass. Big time, right? My view is this is the best subscription product in the gaming world today. By far, I think Microsoft had a clear vision and strategy. They wanted to be the Netflix of gaming, like a buffet style, all you can eat. And tying in their xCloud product with that, to me, was just the icing on the cake, right? It was not the cake in its entirety. It was just, here's another bonus for you guys, right? If you subscribe, you can play these games anywhere too, by the way. Phil, I think here is, maybe he's distraught by getting beaten so badly by the PlayStation 5.
That's possible.
This to me, honestly, they've lost me on this one, because Stadia, fundamentally, this is the Stadia business model, right? Buy all your games. You're locked into Stadia. You have to play them on Stadia. We'll stream them, but you still have to play them on Stadia. And Stadia, there's no one you can't push back on this. Stadia is a failure. And most likely, my guess, at some point in the next year or two, will get shut down. We will not hear about Stadia anymore. So I don't know why Microsoft would want to copy a failed business model when they had one that was so good.
When has Google ever shut down a service that they've promoted and aggressively marketed?
I don't know. Make a G Plus account? Is that possible?
Yeah, we'll add each other on Google Plus. Don't worry about it.
That's right. That's right. We still have our archived copy of that.
But no, I don't get it, right? Like, you have the app, like it. To me, this is arrogance in some ways at its finest, which is we think we can go do what Google couldn't do. When I think Stadia failed because it's a bad product fundamentally, but it was also a bad business model. It never made sense to go pay $70 for a game and be locked into Stadia's ecosystem and have to play your game there. I think the beauty of Game Pass was all you can eat. You get the benefit of the cloud. There's no $60 game. Like, you can still go buy a $60 Xbox game. No one's stopping you. I don't know why it needs to be tied to xCloud in that way explicitly.
The other thing I just want to point out about why I don't like this is, like, this is an ongoing service on the part of the game seller, right? Like, it's not like you buy the game on Microsoft Cloud and then Microsoft never has to do anything again.
True.
Right? Like, they have to continue to run code, pipe data to you, and potentially, as we've seen, it's actually maybe more expensive than you would think to do cloud gaming on behalf of the provider. So that's yet one more reason why I'm like, why do this as a fixed upfront sale? Because the whole reason why discs work as a fixed upfront sale is Microsoft is literally done. They gave you the disc, you have the hardware. They don't have much ongoing responsibility for you here. This is a consistent service, and the subscription model neatly closes it off, because the answer is, we give you the service as long as you pay, not this weird uncapped. And the way you get around it is you probably have to have, I don't want to go into it, but like it's
William, you bring up a great point, but let me give you, I think, the number one reason why this is a bad idea. It's who are these services targeted at primarily? This is not your hardcore gamer, right? Mm-hmm. These are more casual gamers. even, the next step up from casual, something between casual and hardcore, right? And they're not, like, for the most part, the promise of cloud gaming is that it brings gaming to the masses, right? And to bring gaming to the masses, to my mind, it needs to be dead simple. Game Pass is dead simple, right? You buy an Xbox, you sign up for $10 a month, you can play all the games you want. Period. Easy, right? Now you could sign up and pay $10, or you could go, like, now the messaging gets confusing. And again, this is where I think most of these cloud services have failed. They want to go after casual gamers, but they're fundamentally quite complex to understand. And this is where they fall apart for me. Microsoft had something really great. I don't know why Phil Spencer's trying to fuss with it now.
Well, I mean, unless there's just something we don't know about,
True.
like I said, structurally. Like Phil, I think Phil's an incredibly smart guy, right? Like he's obviously done an amazing job running Microsoft, right? There could be external factors about the licensing fees associated with this just make it not profitable to do it at maybe the reality is it's a $40 a month subscription to run it profitably. And that just doesn't make a lot of sense. You'd rather pay $60 for game. I mean, without the underlying, there are unknowns we don't know. But yeah, I would go back to like, okay, look, I'm just gonna, sorry, it happens every podcast. I'm gonna hold out my book one time and say, like, it's like, I have a theory in the book, which is the evolution of business models, which is you can chart as the gaming industry has grown, we've figured out ways to move from single purchase to recurring revenue. And the big first jump we had there was boxed copy to subscription that MMOs drove. And I feel like we're now in that same model we're in that same moment in history for bundled services. We've now realized we can reinvent the product offerings for bundles. And we kind of got bundled gaming sales with, like, what's that store that does discounts all the time? If you buy a whole set of
Humble Bundle,
right? Yeah, like we kind of invented that model, and we're like, oh, this is surprisingly good. You can bundle things at a discount, and it works. It's the BOGO offer for our business, and now we're getting to subscription bundling. We're getting scale and maturing. Why would you go a step back and unbundle and unsubscribe? It's like walking backwards through business model evolution time. Anyway, sorry.
I like it. Let's touch on another piece of Microsoft. Like, speaking of Google canceling products, this was Microsoft canceling a product here. After canceling Mixer essentially, and releasing the very successful now MSN Esports Hub. Microsoft.
Perfect product.
They're gonna sponsor the podcast next
They
week.
are going to sponsor the podcast. So they shut down Minecraft Earth here, right? AR-based game. It was supposed to go head-to-head with, like, the Pokemon Go's of the world. Obviously, the article here says it's because of COVID. People are spending more time indoors. Anyone think this is short-sighted? Look, it's not specific esports related, but Minecraft's a huge property, right? One of the largest, probably one of the best investments Microsoft has ever made. Why shut down Minecraft Earth here, guys?
So I'm going to be the Debbie Downer here. So I spent a lot of time talking to Facebook associates about the success of Oculus Rift.
Yep.
And let me tell you, man, I have a feeling that this just did not catch on. It was not profitable. And listen, COVID, I remember listening to you guys talk about the Overwatch League and how they could have used COVID as an excuse. I think that's Microsoft has nailed it.
This was a convenient, like, just we'll wash this away, right? We'll all forget about this AR thing we tried.
It was the virus. Yeah.
No, I completely agree with you, Brad. I think it's probably the underlying economics of this game didn't perform. The Minecraft brand is a brand that needs to be protected, right? Because it's a marquee brand. This is not the sort of weak product extension you leave out there just to hold a trademark or something. You know what I mean? Like, you got to prune it and focus the brand where it wants to go. I think this is a convenient excuse to get rid of it. Now, it's sad because it was a good idea. Like, let's pause for a second and say to ourselves, like, I thought it was a sweet idea that you could, like, Minecraft feels very extensible to a real life AR simulator like this. But, I guess it turns out it's really difficult to, build big elaborate structures with a real life AR thing. It's much better to do floating around on your home keyboard. So here we are.
I mean, I feel terrible because I literally have friends that work on HoloLens, and, like, let me just go call the 5 people I know with a HoloLens and let's see how they feel about it.
Brad, this is a little bit of a tangent, but are you bearish on AR and bullish on VR? Are you sort of bullish now or bearish like now and bullish later? Like, what is your view on those two things?
So let me answer that question in two ways. First, I have a really interesting demographic slice of gamers, right? Like I've got about 10,000 people who I know everything about. And I will tell you that we cannot even get enough people, even if you do a mixed VR normal game, to run a tournament. Like there's just not enough consoles sold. Yeah, like
Interesting.
it's how like what I generally tell people is however badly you think VR is doing, it's doing worse than that. However, I would like your thoughts on like this really interesting thing that I haven't seen happen very often in esports, where technology has actually moved faster than culture. Because like clearly this is going to take off. Like, have you guys used a VR headset before? They're amazing. I don't want a game anywhere else.
Yeah.
But they just haven't. People just don't embrace it. I don't think they believe in it yet.
So I don't feel the same way about VR. Like this is interesting, but like I definitely agree the technology. There's my Oculus. Again, everything I want to hold up is like right off of. By the way, for the podcast listeners, we do have video for this sometimes. So when I refer to pointing something or holding it up, like I'm actually doing, because when we tape the podcast, we can all see each other. So sorry, just for clarity, but like everything I want to reach for today to hold up is like, right too far away off camera. But I do think there's no question that from where VR was 5 years ago to where it is today, it's like night and day. The experience is incredible. And playing something like Superhot in an Oculus Quest is really, it's awesome. Like, I don't know how to tell you, it's exactly what I want VR to be.
Freaky. Yeah.
It's so good. I also think, though, very strongly, and I've said this before, that we're still not quite there yet on the tech side, that the very best, fanciest games have to be played tethered, and tethered sucks a surprising amount. Like it is like you wouldn't think tethered is that bad until you actually try to game properly tethered and you spin around and get tangled in the cord and you're like, it rips you out of the game. And then the other thing is, I just think we still haven't solved movement in VR games. And I'm very upfront about that. Like, I think like why Superhot is so great is because they fence you in a narrow area and you only move in that area. And so I don't know if I agree with you that tech is there, but it does surprise me that there hasn't been more of a marquee VR title for competitive player esports or something, because the tech that is there is good enough to have something anchoring it, right? And it feels weird that like Beat Saber should be our most, twitched AR VR experience, right?
Have you played Echo Arena? I mean, I would bet you a year from now, Echo Arena is like another major esports title.
That's really cool. I'll take a look at that. I'm not aware of it, but I'd love to take a look.
Yeah,
Brad, I think the explanation behind your data there is that VR is still fundamentally cost prohibitive for most people, right? Like Oculus has made huge headway into fixing that, right? Like a Quest at $299 is the most affordable VR has ever been. And I think that is one of the inflection points VR is going to sort of hit on its way to sort of success and dominance. Because my fundamental belief is we all end up on holodeck someday or Ready Player One kind of universe. So like VR, I'm ultimately bullish for the future. But like cost, I think, has been one of the biggest factors. In the same way, like I've been in tech for 20 years now. If you ask me, I was telling someone this the other day, like about 3D printing. Even 5 years ago, like a reasonably good 3D printer that you could put in your house would have cost you thousands of dollars, right? Today, you can put one for $200. And so I think VR is getting there, but I think the reason why you don't see the big numbers yet is cost first and foremost. And also, I just think, to William's point, the mobility hasn't been solved. We don't have a killer app yet, right? There's no game that's like, oh my God, I got to go buy Quest because I need to play that, right? Like we don't have that yet. But I think,
and to me, like, I just think like we've had things that tried to be there. Like we had the EVE Online, pilot sim that was coming out at VR launch. And then recently we had Half-Life Alyx, which I looked at my time played on that. It's like 5 hours. Like, and I really I got my Oculus Quest to play Half-Life Alyx, and it is one of my least played VR titles. Like,
guys, for sim racing, you can't do it without VR. Like you haven't done sim racing well unless.
Okay, Paul. Okay, you sim racer.
Okay.
Before one more Microsoft story, right? Or no?
Yes, but before we move on, I want to say 2 words. Fastest growing area of gaming and esports today, guys. It's not VR. It's betting. It's gambling. It's booming. You don't need to be a prophet like me to know that. We had the CEO of a company called Esports Entertainment Group on the podcast. They're NASDAQ listed. They're fully regulated. They're in the esports betting and entertainment space. The ticker symbol is GMBL. Really love what they're doing from a strategy standpoint. So if you're a family office, an investor, an institutional investor, an investor of any kind, really, and you're looking to play in esports, highly recommend taking a look at the company, esportsentertainmentgroup.com, ticker symbol GMBL. Having said that, I'm not giving you investment advice here. It's just my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor. I'm not selling stock in the company. Make sure you do your own homework. Seek advice from a licensed professional if you're going to invest. We do have a final Microsoft story, and I know, William, you're excited about this one. It's kind of it's the most lighthearted story of all of them. And fundamentally, here was the headline that caught my attention. Nintendo executives laughed when Microsoft tried to acquire the gaming company. Bit of history here. The article says before they released the Xbox, Microsoft approached several gaming companies so that they could have exclusives to compete against Sony. They approached EA to buy them. They approached Nintendo to buy them. They approached Square Enix to buy them. They approached Midway to buy them. In the end, the only one they bought was Bungie, and for the Halo exclusive.
And then finally, years later, Bethesda took the bait.
That's it. But supposedly, Nintendo executives laughed the Microsoft guys out of the room because they had absolutely no interest in being acquired. William, I know you specifically have quite a bit of expertise in gaming in Japan and Japanese esports and Japanese companies, and why did Microsoft get laughed out of the room here? What was the and did anyone know that Microsoft was being this aggressive from an acquisition standpoint?
That's the more interesting thing in the article is to me is my sense of the history was like Microsoft goes into console, recognize they need one solid first party, buys Bungie. It's a tactical play to limit. And this speaks to a much more concerted strategy of locking up tons of first party exclusives that didn't work, right? And in reality, the Xbox was launching from a position of weakness, right? They had tried. So I thought that was a very interesting kind of nuance on the history that I'd lived it very differently as a gamer. And by the way, kudos to Microsoft because they had some amazing first-party exclusives in the original Xbox. It wasn't just Bungie. They had Ninja Gaiden. That's still one of the greatest third-person action games of all time,
It's interesting to imagine a world, though, where they owned EA, Nintendo, Midway, Square Enix.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the bigger thing for me, though, is it's sort of it definitely speaks to Nintendo's culture, right? That they just don't see themselves as mentally occupying the same market as these other companies do. And I really would start there, right? I think they see themselves as where I would argue that Nintendo doesn't even really see itself as a gaming company so much as it sees itself as Nintendo. Right? It was a family-owned business, I think, until relatively recently, right? I think there was still a lot of familial control, and there still is.
I thought they had to be or something.
I need to know more about that. I need to check, right? I actually should have a better answer to that than I do for this. But and if you think about how they consistently position themselves now in every console generation, it's iconoclastic, right? They've refused to participate in the arms race of highest horsepower, right? They've gone for unique input methods and features. They've refused to embrace the sort of cross-platform launch for key titles and products that has defined many other publishers in the space, even if they do their own, game manufacturing, right? They've, abandoned PC as a port market in a pretty significant way. So they've done a lot of different things, right? But I'm also surprised because wouldn't you be interested if Microsoft asked to buy your business? And it's not like Microsoft can't pay. Nintendo is a big company, but particularly Microsoft at the point of the original Xbox, before mobile had really become a thing and become a competitive venue to maybe reduce PC share, they were it. They
Apple
were
was not even a reasonable competitor. They were sort of in the the interesting thing for me here is there's sort of a business lesson. I always love I get asked the question by investors a lot, should I be playing in esports? Should I put money in the space? When is the right time? right? There's a great business lesson here, which is investment hindsight's 2020, right? When you look back, had Microsoft managed to make all these acquisitions, we're talking about potentially some of the best, maybe in the history of acquisitions, right? That these game publishers have become so massively valuable today. And probably what Microsoft could have paid for them back then would have been peanuts relative to where we are now. Those would have turned out to be some of the best acquisitions ever. And this is sort of how I feel about the broader investing in esports market today, which is like the best time is now. The longer you wait, like the numbers are only going up and getting bigger. This is not going in the other direction. And so, there's an interesting lesson here for me for investors who listen to the podcast. You don't want to end up being Microsoft in this situation and end up having to pay, Bethesda money 20 years later.
That's true,
right?
Because what I guarantee you, whatever they were thinking of acquiring, whatever they could have acquired Bethesda for at the time is orders of magnitude fractional to what they paid to buy it today. Yeah, that's true. And that's also why I think, Paul and I are often both bad cop on the price of things in the industry, right? We're always like, it's too expensive, the burn is too high, blah, blah, blah. You don't get a lot of Paul and I on this podcast ever pushing back against the acquisitions, even when they're multiples of a Star Wars franchise, which again, my favorite thing, because it's just, they pay the dividends. Like, even if you overpay in the short term a little, the long-term potential is so good. And the synergies of having the IP collectively held, the bundling, if you will, is so good that you can probably figure out how to get your acquisition value down the line.
Brad, specifically in this article, they talk about in 2020, Microsoft approached Nintendo for a partnership where they would produce hardware, Nintendo would produce software. Do you think that would have been a win-win? Why? I'm curious why you think maybe Nintendo turned that down.
Right, Paul? You mean like
2020?
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's in the article.
So say that again. So Microsoft would produce the hardware or the software?
So I'll read the article specifically. It says, Microsoft reportedly met again with Nintendo in January 2020 to pitch the company on a joint venture. The pitch was that Nintendo wasn't good at hardware, but was strong in the games business with Mario and other brands. Microsoft said they would take care of the hardware. Nintendo declined the joint venture.
So Microsoft is saying the Game Boy company is bad at hardware?
It's true.
Like, what?
Well, no, but like, to be fair, right? Like, this is what I mean about a different perspective, is I think Microsoft sees themselves as designing the highest horsepower per dollar efficient unit. And that to them is winning the space. That's their mentality. And Nintendo's mentality is totally different. It's, we're going to produce hardware with novel functionality to enable new areas of differentiated game design and to make sure that the sorts of games we produce can't port easily or be copied on other platforms, right? That's why they go for novel control schemes like the Wii or touch with the Nintendo DS, or their whole thing has been carving out a creative moat for themselves. So it just shows it's two ships passing in the night. They have very different definitions of what hardware is supposed to do.
But to Brad's point, William, if you're Microsoft walking into Nintendo, maybe the best pitch isn't, hey, you guys aren't good at hardware. Right?
Oh, there's nothing better than pitching people and telling them that their business, they're not doing a good job at.
Also, business advice for our listeners: don't open any pitch with "you suck at." Like,
I'm gonna go to Microsoft now and maybe like, guys, as we all know, you struggle in operating systems. So I have a pitch, but you're very good at tablets. So you make the tablets and I'll make.
Guys, this was fun. That wraps up this week's podcast. Brad, thank you so much for being on the show. How can people find you?
They can find the CEA at gamingforgood.gg, and very, very fun being on here, guys. I really did enjoy it. Thank you.
And you personally, LinkedIn, anything, Twitter, anything you want to shout out?
I'm not an important icon. Don't look at me. Go look at the CEA. Go find them.
Okay. Gaming for Good or Gaming for Good?
Gamingforgood.gg.
Gamingforgood.gg. I love it. I love the mission. William, thank you as always. To our listeners, thank you guys. Make sure to leave that 5-star rating and review on the podcast. Tell your friends about it. Go check out some of the Business of Esports merch if you haven't yet. And as always, don't forget, every Wednesday evening, our post-podcast live stream. It's a lot of fun. We do all the stuff we didn't cover on the podcast, some more lighthearted stuff, a little bit more gaming stuff. Still always talking about the business side of the industry, obviously. Wednesday evenings, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, just about everywhere. YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, you can find us anywhere. Also, I just want to shout out this week, guys. We have a revamped Instagram account at Biz Esports, and we have a new TikTok account at Biz Esports, which has been growing like crazy, even just over the last few days. So go follow those. Thank you again. Stay tuned for the live stream, and we will see you guys next week.